Good evening, everyone. I am Sumedha Hiramat, NISBWI Chairperson. It is my absolute pleasure to welcome you all for today's Tech Talk, Exploring AI and Generative AI, Unlocking the Art of the Possible. This event is proudly organized by IEEE Student Branch Women in Engineering in collaboration with IEEE WIE Affinity Group Bangalore section as a part of our special Tech Talk series for International Women's Day celebrations. In alignment with this year's global theme, Accelerate Action, today's session is not just about understanding AI, it's about exploring how AI is driving the change, revolutionizing industries, and shaping the future of innovation. From automating complex processes to enhancing human creativity, AI and generative AI are unlocking possibilities we never imagined before. We are honored to have a distinguished expert with us today, Ms. Bhuvana, as the speaker. And to introduce our esteemed speaker, I now invite NISBWI Secretary Anusha to take over. Thank you, and I hope you all have an insightful session ahead.
Good evening, everyone. It's an absolute honor to introduce our distinguished speaker for today's session, Ms. Bhuvaneshwari. She is the Chief Technologist at Worldwide Advisory and Professional Services AI Solutions at HPE. With extensive expertise in AI, analytics, and data, she specializes in architecting end-to-end AI solutions. She caters to clients across various industries. Her proficiency includes industry-led generative AI solutions, modern data platforms, data governance, digital twins, and data mesh, enabling her to deliver tailored solutions. Her successful track record in implementing complex data-driven solutions has significantly improved business processes for clients in healthcare, finance, retail, manufacturing, and more. She is also an active advocate and core supporter of diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, leading and contributing to various programs within HPE and across industries. Additionally, she is involved in the Women in Digital Health program, specifically focusing on initiatives that advance women's health through technology and innovation. Today, she will be sharing her insights on exploring AI and generative AI, unlocking the art of possible. This session delves into the transformative power of artificial intelligence and generative AI across industries, including research and education. It emphasizes the critical role of data, cross disciplinary collaboration, and innovation in driving advancements in research and development. The session also explores ethical AI adoption, responsible AI practices, and emerging career opportunities for the next generation of AI professionals. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming Ms. Bhuvaneshwari. Ma'am, we are truly honored to have you with us today. The chat box will be open for your questions throughout the session. They shall be addressed in the Q&A session later. Over to you, ma'am.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Anusha. And I would like to thank IEEE for this opportunity. But then one just quick check. Okay, I can share right now, correct? And I would request someone to confirm me if they're able to see my screen and the presentation is visible.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. Hey, good evening, all. It's my honor and pleasure to be here and share the industry perspective. So whatever I'm going to talk today is mostly coming from the actual customers, what they're asking for, and the organization, what they're looking forward from AI and Gen AI, and how the initiatives they are going on, and what are the challenges they are facing, and where you guys can also think of, right? I born and brought up in India, and I have done my education in India. Coming from that background, that we always think what is written in the textbook, right, and whatever has been taught to us, right. I would request everyone here to think beyond that, right? Because when we think of the problem statement, spend a lot of time on the problem statement itself and think it from the holistic approach. When I say holistic approach, AI is just an intelligence, right? You will have to think it beyond that, how it goes and get integrated, what actually it is trying to solve, how it is helping the customers, how it is helping someone else's life, right? So with that, let's get started, right? So with this slide, initially, whenever we think of any problem statement, we'll look for what are the key research numbers, what is this technology all about, how it is actually changing, or what are the dynamics it is bringing onto the market, right? If you see that the first research reports from McKinsey states that long-term AI opportunity at 4.4 trillion in added productivity growth potential from corporate use cases. What this really mean to us and to you and to everybody, right? 4.4 trillion is not a small number, right? That is the opportunity which AI and generative AI is bringing onto the table, right? And if you see it from the broader perspective, that is the market size which McKinsey is stating, right? And also, if you think it from the organization or the customer's perspective, the optimizations, the performance aspects, all that they want to bring into their customers within this scope, right? So this is a huge number for all of us, right? And then next one, I think, would be the more interesting one for you, which Gartner says that, generative AI will require 80% of the engineering workforce to upskill through 2027. What this really mean, right? So when I sit with the customers today, one of the challenge our customers or our organizations are facing today in the enterprise world is upskill. Because when the whole software era or the IT era started, the AI was existing, but it is not to the extent what it is there today, right? And the technology is changing every minute, I would say, right? And we are having so many different tools, we are having so many different algorithms, so many ways of integrating the solution, so many ways of bringing the things onto the table, right? With that, whatever legacy things we learned, will that helpfully? No. And at the same time, am I saying that it is completely of nothing of use? That is not also the concept here, right? It is always upskilling. So the request for you guys is always keep learning. It's today, though I'm in the industry, I keep learning every day, right? Because things are changing. We have to keep up with the market. We have to keep up with the technology. So it is like, every day's turn that you have to learn something new, right? So that's what it is mentioning, and it is actually true. And organizations are facing this problem, and also they ask us, like, what are the certain programs we should launch in the in our organization or within the enterprise world to upskill our own workforce, right? And the last part of this one was like 60% of the organization will adopt performance intensive, software driven scale out storage infrastructure and unified data management to accelerate insights for AI and analytics. What again this mean to all of us, right? This mean when we think of any solution, right, we always think of the software aspect itself, but software is not just the one which is going to help us, right? The core concept behind today also for all the software, all the AI, all the Gen AI, all the digital twin is data. Data is a core part of the core part of any of these solutions. At the same time, where this data reside, at the end of the day, it goes on to some infrastructure, right? So infrastructure, I understand that, everybody think of GPU itself. It's not just GPU, right? There is beyond the word GPU, which is really required for you to run the solutions, right? And towards the right, if you see there is a chart, right? So this chart specifically highlights what are some of the core industries where the spends are, or how the market is saying, right? If you see the higher spend is in healthcare, technology, media and telecom, advanced industries, agriculture. And that is very true. The customers with whom I'm working majorly are coming from healthcare, technology, and media and telecom. The other one I would also add is retail and e-commerce, right? These are specifically the industries where they see that, a lot of organizations are spending money and they want to bring up the solutions in this arena, because they are seeing the opportunities there and a lot of use cases in that segment. We will see some of these use cases as we move ahead in the some of the slides, okay? And then the low spend is on financial services. I don't agree on that completely, because financial services, a lot of use cases with a lot of, the other thing when it comes to the financial services, the major challenge for the financial services today is how do they secure their data, because data security is becoming a major challenge for many of these organizations, especially in the finance side. And then energy and materials, consumer goods, hardware engineering, travel, transportation, and logistics. So these are the lowest spend when compared to the higher spend, but financial services, I would put it in the higher spend too, right? And another thing, okay, so while I'm talking, I don't want it to be very monotonous. If you have anything to ask, or if you want me to focus on anything else, just raise your hand, or you can put it in the chat, right? So that, I don't want to be just talking and you just guys listening, right? So I just want to make this as much as possible interactive. So you can go ahead and ask your questions, or you can stop me anytime in between my presentation too. Okay. And then when after seeing the key numbers, right, what next? How did this all started? Because for any technology to start, it is not today or tomorrow. There is a history behind everything, right? So if you see the history behind this, is it started all from 1950, right, where Alan Turing started the Turing test in Princeton University. That was like, maybe that time it was not known that it is an artificial neural network test, but it started from there, right? And then in between 1950 to 1960, there was artificial intelligence, which was, the term was coined, right? So 1950 to 1960, it was more of like, you can think of like the era has started. It was all predefined rule-based systems, which are like yes and no kind of things, right? And then later on, the birth of deep learning. So deep learning was a major one, where it has to have those links, the neural network links and the things like that, and where the deeper layer of thoughts has to be put in to come to a decision point, right? And from 70s to 80s, it was not much of progress because of certain reasons, and whatever they were expecting not meeting because of many of the reasons, right? And from there, it again started, right? The expert systems was established during that time, and then from 1990 to 2000, right? That's where I think little bit more focus was given, and I think the more changes we started seeing, where it became more prominent, and people started thinking of what is this AI all about, right? And then in 2000, I think Andrew Ng created a deep learning training model, right? I think that changed a lot of things, because from there onwards, we started understanding what are these multi-layered neural networks, right? And these became the mainstream, and this also revolutionized the language understanding, basically your NLP, right? And then also kind of self-supervised learning models are started from there onwards for the unstructured data, right? So that's where it all became very evident. And from 2010 to 2020, I think 2010, we had, a lot of changes coming into the play, where we started having the artificial intelligence, or the CNN models, unit models for, context-based and domain-based AI, right? And then particular vertical segments or the industry started seeing um, the importance of those models, and it started making certain amount of decisions by learning by itself, not by the way it was the rule-based system, right? And then 2020, I think that was the era of our generative AI. LLMs came into the play, where it was not just the language, human reached human like reasoning levels, right? And then also it started creating the text, image, music, videos, whatnot, right? And even to code some extent. So the next question would be, what the software engineers are going to do when the systems are coding. So that's the point. You have to think what beyond you can do, right? And at the same time, there is a perception also that Gen AI will kill a lot of jobs. Gen AI will not kill a lot of jobs. Gen AI will generate the jobs which are different than what we are doing today, right? So being versatile and being flexible is very much required if you want to survive in IT industry, and if you want to continue your job in the IT segment. And then also, apart from this, right, also just not this, right, then you also had multimodality came into the play when after 2020. I think now it is all that, we don't talk about one data set, we don't talk about multiple data set, and we want only one model to perform all the tasks on these data, be it structured data, unstructured data, or semi-structured data, right? And that's the era which is changing a lot of things, and this era is scary also, but at the same time, I would take it as a, the advancement which would help the humankind in a different way, right? And then if you to see on the right hand side, right, like it all started with rule-based system, as I previously mentioned. It was just the if and if else statements, right? The conditional statements, where you had, okay, if this condition meets, say yes. If this condition is not meeting, then say no, right? So this was the kind of the decision support systems which used by financial industries in the early days, right? Then comes the context-based AI, right? Context-based AI understands the context and adapts the responses accordingly. It basically like, you had your NLP and contextual awareness within the system, which was met, right? It was also improving the amount of personalization for the organization or the people, where because it had some amount of context. You can think of the examples like your Alexa, Siri, right? Those are all I would put it under the context-based AI. Then comes the domain AI. Domain AI, I can think of it like, those were the models which were built with basically with the deep learning technology, right? And it had more specific domain, and also but it at the same time it was lacking the general intelligence, right? The domain AI, right? Like I can think of the example, especially in the healthcare, for example, identifying the cancerous cells or the tumors within the brain, right? So you have your MRI scans, and then basically you have your deep learning model, which would identify whether it, there was anything found which was not neutral, or which is not the normal norm, right? It is something different which they identify in that X-ray imaging or the MRI scans, right? So that was domain, because these models were specifically built for specific domain. It could understand the language which it was trained on. It will not understand the language which it was not trained on, right? Then comes the era of reasoning AI. Reasoning AI actually, I would say became more sense, or it started bringing intelligence onto the table, where it is like logical reasoning. It had a problem solving capabilities. It also had to some extent the decision making capabilities too, right? So here you can think of the example like, making some strategic decisions, right? Maybe like route optimization kind of examples within the organizations, or the use cases where customer focused on AI to make a decision with some reason, right? And also, if I don't know whether how many of you are exploring agentic AI, right? Agentic AI, you need reasoning behind that, right? When you run the agentic AI models, it actually does that in the back end, right? So it has to, some amount of it has to also tell us that what it is using, why it is using, right? That's when you will believe in the system. If you're not given, if you're just given a system to just utilize and speak about it, it is not, it doesn't make any sense, right? And then comes your AGI. AGI and self-aware AI, I would put it in the category that it is more of a theoretical aspect today, and a lot of experimentation are happening in this. And these are the two things which I think, if these become true, then I think a lot of human intelligence will be snatched by the systems, right? Because if you think of it like AGI and self-aware AI, they can do certain things, right? So when I used to think what AI is not possible, or what AI cannot do today, is some things like, the emotions which we have as a human being, and spontaneous decision making, right? And the generalized aspect, because we just don't see the problem statement with one lens, right? We wear different lenses when it comes to the problem statement, because we also put our experience which we have learned, right, so far in the life, and then make a decision, right? Today, these capabilities AI lacks, right? If this comes onto the power, I don't know where we will head to, right? But again, these are theoretical today, and but a lot of experimentation in across the industry it is happening. Okay. With that, let's move on and understand what are some of the key trends, right? So these are some of the key trends which we are seeing from many of the customers, and also across the industry, and a lot of enterprises where they are focusing on these aspects, because with the Gen AI, right? Not just AI, with the Gen AI, these are becoming very prominent for everyone to kind of understand and put some effort to see what best we can do in each of these segments, right? Multimodal AI. Traditionally, the processing used to be with, very data set, right? The different data set which used to be have some specialized models for each of these data sets. And we used to have, like, for example, the domain, right? The domain models, which are domain specific AI, right? Where you had a specific data set, and the model is trained with that specific data set, and you need to have multiple of these models if you want to bring in that, the whole framework, or you want to make everything to work together, right? This would burden, in 2 to 3 aspects, right? One is burden on your infrastructure, and second is burden on the latency, because it would take a long time to process and do the things, right? But with multimodal AI, now it has capabilities to process different data types at the same type for the given model. When I say this, when I say different data types, I'm referring to text, video, audio, right? Whatever multimodality you talk about today, all the modalities will be handled by a single model. So this reduces the latency, this reduces the way we are handling that things, and this reduces the burden on the infrastructure too, right? So that is one aspect of multimodal AI where a lot of focus on today. Right? Next comes your agentic and physical AI. I'm pretty sure you guys would have a lot of insight on agentic AI than me. Right? I'm pretty sure about it because that has been a trending term, especially this year. Right? So we can what agentic AI, right? So for me, agentic AI, I'm thinking agents are as a small human beings which are performing some tasks, right? Like you can imagine a house, right? So earlier, when I remember during my young days, right, when we used to gather in grandma's place for holidays, right? We used to a lot of kids at home, and each one of us would be given small tasks where it goes, and we used to perform those small tasks for the bigger one task, right? So you can I correlate that with agentic AI, where there are a lot of small tasks which are given, and then which are like given to each of these agents and bringing the intelligence and becoming more and more intelligent, and parallelism is achieved at the same time. We are not just relying on one data source or one knowledge base. For example, today RAG applications, we are relying on one knowledge base, right? I'm relying on vector DB to tell me what it is, right? Whatever you have uploaded is correct, but that is not the way, right? That because of that, we are seeing the hallucinations, right? So how do we avoid that? And how do we bring in that generalized aspect to what we are talking about, or what the intelligence or what the decision is making, right? So that's where this agentic AI is coming, and like the small agents which are going beyond that, which are used for validations, which are used for your which are used for validation tasks, which are used to bring in more knowledge from the outside world and make the decision more accurate and more accurate and more nearer to the aspect of which or what we are thinking of, right? And then comes your open source LLM. Of course, open source LLMs are still evolving. The best example is every day we are seeing the upgrades to the model, right? And we have to do the justification why one should rely on open source model and why one should rely on the enterprise or the model, the paid version for which you are paying for the tokens or the licenses cost, right? So today there is a lot of pressure on some of the companies, right? Especially not the ones which are not open source, like your Anthropic, OpenAI, on to justify why one should pay so much of so much of money for the inferences, right? And if you see, when the OpenAI started, the cost of the inference cost and the cost today we are having for the inference has come down, right? So that's where it showcases that there is a lot of scope in open source LLMs, right? And reasoning in the foundation model, I already mentioned or spoke about this in the last slide. Reasoning is required because without reasoning, I don't think so anybody would rely on the system, or I would rely on the system when it is making a decision on my behalf, right? So these are kind of the models which are trained with reinforcement learning to perform the complex tasks, right? Where it finds reasons and they answer, and actually they take it, it's like chain of thoughts, right? If you this is another widely used coin term, which is chain of thought, to kind of to respond to what is coming up, why it is happening, how it is happening. So these are all comes behind the reasoning models, right? And then comes the small language model. This is my favorite, because when I think of the large language model, this is not accessible to everybody today, right? And at the same time, if I'm not making these available to everyone, then actually we are killing the innovation, right? We are not reaching everyone. So how do we reach to everyone is with the small language model, especially when I think of the edge use cases, when I think of the small scale use cases, when I think of specific domain in the large language model, I think of small language models, right? And a lot of aspects on this as well, and a lot of experimentation happening here, and right, like especially with DeepSeek and then, the Quen, the Meta's, Llama models, and then you have your Mistral, some of the open sourced or, available SLMs, right? So how we can achieve or bring in the intelligence which is there within the large language models inside the small language model is another aspect, right? And then comes your chips, which I said that, software is one aspect to it, but at the end of the day, where it goes chips is on infrastructure. You need to have chips and more powerful devices, and you also require the equal amount of memory too, right? So there is like, if you see it today, right, Nvidia is the best example when we think of the new chips, especially in terms of GPU, right? They own around 90% of 70 to 90% of the market share today in this segment, right? And not only them, but also if I go beyond this, today a lot of other companies are also experimenting with this. The startups, they are also trying to see what best they can do, because it cannot be one leader segment within the industry, right? So we need to have multiple vendors. So that's where the other segment, which there is a lot of experimentation and a lot of scope for all of us, right? So these are some of the key trends. I'll take a pause and ask if there are any questions so far, or if not, then I'll move ahead.
Yes, ma'am. We have a question here from Shreyas N.
Mhm.
He has asked, is agentic AI is combination of AI generalist and prompt engineering?
AI generalist and prompt engineering. So prompt engineering is one aspect to it, and then also you can think of RAG into it, right? And also the specialized agents which would sit, right? So it is combination of multiple technology behind that. Hope I answered the question. If not, let me know.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. I'll move on. So when you think of all of those things, right, next concept would be to understand what are those some of the building blocks, right? When all this is fine, then what comes is what are the building blocks behind those all solutions, all those creating technology, all those aspects, right? So here comes some of these building blocks, which are like, which starts again with the infrastructure layer, right? Um, and I would like to highlight one more key aspect over here. Okay, infrastructure companies today are not just focusing on infrastructure. For example, I sit in HPE. We are not just focusing on infrastructure. We are focusing on software layer. We are focusing on the services layer, right? So infrastructure is core competency required for you to run the models. At the same time, software and services aspects are also important, right? With that infrastructure, when we think of infrastructure, I have seen, this is again coming from the practical aspect. Okay, but I've seen the systems when systems are designed, right? So today everybody are behind just the GPU, but just the GPU is not going to solve all the problems for us. Agentic AI requires a lot of memory, right? And all, not just the memory, not just the GPU, I also need CPU, because I cannot let go of my workloads which are already running in my system. For example, when you think of healthcare industry, or if you think of a financial industry, they have domain specialized model. Can I just let go of those models, those applications just with Gen AI? The answer is no, right? And these are going to coexist in the ecosystem. When we think of this coexisting in the ecosystem, then I'll have to think of the CPU too, right? I have seen people making mistakes where they design the systems with just keeping GPU in the mind, but that is not the aspect to it, right? You need to have a CPU as well, because GPU, I agree that the LLM models or the Gen AI models will of course sit on top of it, right? But then how you're going to manage your application side of it, right? How you're going to manage your all the processes which has to run behind, right? So the previous question, if I go back, there is a combination of many of the things which goes beyond that, right? So how do you integrate all these aspects? And the CPU is the one which is going to handle some of these aspects to it, right? So infrastructure layer is not just the GPUs, but also the CPUs, memory, everything, right? And the network. I have seen the network as being, sometimes the network also becomes the throttle point or the bottleneck, because the data resides in multiple systems. So how do you bring those data back onto the system? You require a proper bandwidth for the data to flow seamlessly to build these models or to experiment with these models, right? Then comes your data layer. This is my favorite layer, and I started my journey with a career, with data, and then moved on to AI. Big data was the era where it started, right? So data is core, and I believe today many of us are, or including many of the organization enterprises, the mistakes we are making is like garbage in and garbage out, because we are collecting all the data which is getting generated. That is not going to help or solve all the problems. It is actually making things very complicated, because we are spending a lot of time in curating the data itself, right? So if you ask me, core aspect for your Gen AI LLM is data. If the data is right, the model is right. If the data is wrong, the model is wrong, right? If you it doesn't have the intelligence still, because I mentioned previously the self-aware AI and other the AGI concepts are still in the experimentation stage, right? So those are not completely fully baked in solutions. So still it relies on something, and that something is data. And if you ask me today, if you feed some customers asks me, okay, this interesting question, how can I say that it is very accurate? Because they comes from the SME world, because they are domain specific experts, right? For them it is very easy to identify what is wrong and what is right, but for engineers who is building the system may not be the same case, right? So so in that case we rely on the data, or whatever the data is being provided to me, I'll build the model with that, right? And if my data is wrong, then of course the prediction is going to be wrong, right? Um, so that is also one reason why the trust on the AI models is also some amount of, some amount of jerk for the people, and especially how do you convince your elders to rely on AI models, right? So you require strong data points there, and strong data is required there, right? And lot of silos today in the organization, because when they started, or when we all started our journey of the IT world, we started small, right? And we have legacy systems, legacy data in different system. And now I'm building a new system. So I have to build the connectivity from there to here. And I cannot let go of that data, because that data helps me, right? So having the right data and storing the right data and labeling the right data is very important. Okay. And then intelligence tools and technology. Intelligence, when I say here, intelligence on is your AI. When I say AI, it refers to both Gen AI and and the LLM and the traditional AI too, right? And tools and technology, lot of them today, right? Lot of tools and technology, but all of them are helpful today, I'm not sure, right? So we will have to really, really think of it and see what it is and how it is and how it is going to help, right? And then comes your next layer as the orchestration and the API layer, right? So if I think of the orchestration layer, since, like, for example, let's take an agentic AI example itself, right? Crew AI is an orchestration for me, right? LangChain is an orchestration engine for me, because I'm integrating a lot of systems, so I cannot do it by one aspect, right? So I need to have some orchestration engine who is working for me to integrate all these things and giving one outcome for me, right? And then the API layer. So API layer, everything is API based today, because if you want to make your apps to be consumed by the consumer application, which is the topmost layer, you require that API layer, right? And sometimes I think, right, instead of moving the data from here to there, can I just build some APIs, right? Just with that API call, I should be able to pull the data and understand the data as well, what is stored in that system, right? Those APIs exist today, but it is not helping to the fuller extent. That could be an opportunity, right? So these are some of the, I would say, some of the building blocks today for all of these key technologies or key aspects. With that, let's deep dive into each of these layers. Okay, so I'm focusing here on the chips, though I mentioned about the memory and the CPU, but because just to to showcase what is running in the market today, right? So if you think of Nvidia, I think, as I already mentioned, they have 70 to 90% of the market share in this segment, right? They are building the chips which are like, especially with the Blackwell, right? The latest one, 25% of the energy efficient chips or GPU. And then also the another aspect to note here is the trillions of parameters, or which are which are used for your LLM training and LLM fine tuning and LLM inference can fit onto those chips, right? So that's the technology, or that's the beauty of it. Then comes your AMD chips. So the equal, I would say, equal amount of efforts or the experimentation is happening at the AMD as well, especially for the chips for the data centers to process the AI, right? Then comes the Intel. Intel also, like, building the chips, and they have their different segment or different technology for your AI training and inference for LLMs, right? And then I mean, and then comes the Meta, right? So Meta doesn't want to rely on vendors, the external vendors, for their to run their workloads or build their models or to bring in their aspects, right? So that's the reason Meta is also spending a lot of it, especially for the deep learning models, and also for the LLMs where they are building their recommendation models, right? The Instagram, the Facebook, the WhatsApp. So all the recommendations are coming, and those are getting run on their chips, right? Then the Qualcomm. For especially this, I think the segment focuses on the mobile devices or the edge centric GPUs, right? The lightweight edge centric CPUs where they can use it for training and for the inference. I would say it will be mostly for the inference than training, because edge devices we perform a lot of inferences than training, right? So these are some of the vendors and some of the the trends, how the chips are moving, right? And then comes the data, right? So the next layer, if you remember from the building block, was data. That from the data perspective, if you see, I already mentioned, right? This is core of everything, and without this, everything is not, right? So labeling. Now, how the labeling has changed from traditional AI to the Gen AI, right? If you think of the data labeling with traditional AI was an expensive process, right? Because the model we were training was very domain specific, and labeling used to work to a bigger extent, right? But with Gen AI, I think that is not the case. If you think of a RAG-based application, I just upload a document which gets created as an embedding stored in the vector DB and then retrieved. So labeling is reduced, but at the same time, we require labeling at different aspects, but it might not be a so expensive process which it was with traditional AI. For example, the outcome has to be labeled for some of the use cases. I can talk about that when we move on to the use case section, right? Where whether the outcome is positive or negative, was the what was the sentiment behind that, right? The outcome. So that's where we require some amount of labeling still there, right? And then comes the governance. This is big for Gen AI compared to traditional AI, because traditional AI, we knew what data we are feeding in. We knew, we used to synthetically generate the data and feed into to kind of secure the data set, right? But today with Gen AI, I'm not sure the models are trained with all data, right? And also some amount of copyright data might be there. Who knows? I don't know, right? So a lot of ethical concerns, lot of copyright concerns organizations are facing in terms of governance. So this is a big one. And then the quality of the data. I already mentioned quality was there with traditional AI, quality is also there with a Gen AI. So this is another segment where we will have to kind of focus more. Then the life cycle with the traditional AI for the data set was easy because we know where it starts, where it ends. But in Gen AI, we don't know, uh, because with every application you are uploading the data constantly and you are making a model to answer for you, right? So it is very different. And then comes to the tools and pipeline. Tools were limited when it was traditional AI. With Gen AI, it is not limited. So I think every week, or I would say every week is a wrong term. Maybe every day we are releasing a new tool in the market, or we see a new tool in the market to utilize or captivate mostly the Gen AI things, right? And then comes your pipeline. When I think of a data pipeline, the pipeline for the traditional AI was very different when compared to the pipeline for the Gen AI, right? So traditional AI pipelines was more focused on traditional AI pipelines were more focused on um, you know pre-processing. The data was stored, you'll have to pre-process, you'll have to clean it, perform the EDA, then consume that, right? The MLOps life cycle. And when it comes to the Gen AI, the pipelines are very different because you're uploading the data. For example, if you take the RAG-based application itself, right? Uploading the data and creating the embeddings, store these embeddings and retrieve, right? So the data pipelines are also changing, right? So this is how the things are evolving from traditional AI to Gen AI. I can pause for a minute or I can continue. Are there any questions? Or let me then silence means that I'll continue and then I'll take up the questions in the end. Okay. So let's focus on some of the industry verticals. I will not be talking about all these use cases. It would take long time. So I'll just touch base one or two and then we will see in each segment, different segments, right? So FSI. FSI, when I think of the financial services, fintech, insurance, and banking, these are the three prominent ones which comes into the play, right? And these use cases are actually the use cases which we are hearing from the customers or which are trending in the market today, okay? Dog bots or virtual assistants or, chatbots, whatever you say, how do you make someone to talk to their data, right? This is a prominent use case in fintech. For example, there are a lot of policies, procedures, lot of documentation which exist in many of these organizations, right? So how do we make it more accessible and to everybody to kind of consume this data, right? So that's where you upload the data and you have a chatbot answering your questions, right? So that's where we are making talk to your data or understand, because if you give a PDF file to a human and ask them to summarize, it would take long years for them to do it, right? But when it comes to the doc bots or the virtual assistant, it takes I think a couple of minutes just to give you the summary or to perform the question and answer, or you perform the searches abilities, right? So that's the beauty. Then comes your the insurance kind of a segment where you need to have, I mean, like everybody rely on call centers, right? So when you have call centers, today call center agents or most of the calls get routed to the intelligent agents or the bots rather than getting routed to the actual call center employee, right? So the call center agents actually can we enable them with some amount of intelligence? Yes, that is possible because we can provide some amount of data sets, right, and build some kind of a brain behind them, which would make their life easier. Oh, this was the history and this was the use case. This is how it was handled. Take this the same approach and handle it, right? That makes their life easy and reduce the handling time, the average handling time, the call average handling time for the customers as well, right? And you can also think of the insurance with the handwritten signatures, right? So the handwritten signatures in India, we write from left to right, right? If you go to other geographies, there are multiple ways how they write it. So this is a big challenge, right? So how can we make a system to understand left to right is same, right to left is same, and top to bottom is same. The signature varies, right? And when you think of a signature, when a human is signing any signature, right? First time, second time, third time. The fourth time, the signature would vary to some extent because all these are nervous points, right? So the nervous system, the brain, it is all connected to my brain, right? So the pressure builds up in your nerves and that nerves pressure goes to your brain and then that gets altered, right? So how do we make our system intelligent to understand little amount of that variation and what is that acceptable variation and what is not acceptable variation, right? So that is a traditional AI use case, but this was very interesting use case and very interesting thought process where it is really required to identify to what extent that variation is accepted, right? So these are some of the interesting use case which we are seeing in the finance, right? Let's move on to the healthcare. In healthcare, especially if I think of India, right? We all have apps in our mobile devices today, right? But when you think of a healthcare for India, I would think of how do I make it reachable to the regional or the rural places with so many language, so many different dialects spoken across the country, right? So that's the intelligence and that's the problem I think some some focus has to be provided, or I would also say that organizations are looking forward that kind of approach where Gen AI would solve that problem for them, right? Because even if you take it in Karnataka, the dialect in the northern part of the Karnataka, the dialect in the southern part of the Karnataka is very different, right? So how do you make these apps so personalized that and so customized that it understands them by itself and answer the things accordingly, right? So this is one important aspect where lot of focus is going on. Okay, and then comes to your drug discovery and biomedical research, right? So this is another one where we have seen customer. I can pick up one is like genome sequencing and treatments, right? Why genome sequencing is important, right? So the genome study in bioinformatics or biomedical segment is important one, because the kids born with certain amount of disability, right, or certain amount of flaws, those can be identified by with these genomes being or the gene study which happens beforehand itself, right? And what can be predicted, what is going to happen, how it is going to happen, and how it can be stopped, or whether it can be stopped or not, right? So these are some of the aspects which is coming from the genome sequencing things, right? And next one is also important one, which is women health care, right? Women health care, if I think of it, lot of I'm personally working on some of the women tech based use cases, right? And also I know that in India this is not taken with the highest consideration, the first one itself, right? The postpartum depression and anxiety in India, especially if you think of the rural areas, right? After the delivery, right? I don't think so woman is given a equal privilege, or people try to understand what she is going through, right? Because there will be a lot of changes in the health for her, a lot of hormonal changes, lot of it is a different world altogether for her, right? How, and there are a lot of models which are getting built for this one, where we are trying to understand what are those changes and how we can help her to get out of this depression and anxiety, right? So this actually, I know some of the startups where they are working actively on this part, right? And I want this to be reached to, especially in India and especially to the rural areas. In urban areas there is some amount of awareness, but in rural areas I don't think so there is any awareness around this, right? And then the other one is breast cancer detection through mammogram and MRI analysis, right? I know one of the startup in India where it was started by, proud to say that it was started by a woman from HPE. She's an ex-HPE employee, right? Where she is running a startup where it has a deep learning model which has capabilities to identify the breast cancer at the early stages, right? So I see a lot of scope, and this is actually uh, where organizations are actually spending a lot of money on these kind of segments too, right? These are some of the use cases for healthcare. Next comes the media and entertainment. I'm pretty sure this is kind of interesting one for current generation, right? So I'll touch on one use case on entertainment, which is very interesting one, right? So imagine today any sport activity which is happening in the stadium, you all go watch that match live, right? Can you enable this to make it as a virtual experience with a hologram lens, sitting at people who are sitting at in their hall who could watch this, right? And it is possible with your AR and VR experience, or I would also call it as a metaverse experience, right? So this is what the entertainment industry is looking forward for, the kind of use cases where they can have virtual e-tickets created, the virtual experience getting created, and you can wear the hologram lens and then kind of experience that one, correct? And then the other one is the, the digital media itself, right? How can we utilize the digital media to train the players, right? This we have seen with some of the e-gaming activities or e-gaming sports industry as well, where the coach is somewhere remote, right? But at the same time, the player is also somewhere remote. How can you enable a coach to understand the history and understand his capabilities and train the player to play and make him more better, right? And also we did one interesting use case for, especially for the e-gaming, where it was when you are playing a lot of, I know that you guys play a lot of games today online, right? When you're playing online games, there will be a sentiment, right? So we took those audio recordings, we did the sentiment analysis with those audio transcriptions, and said that this was the point where you broke down. You wouldn't, if you wouldn't have broken down, if your emotion was strong, you would have won the game, right? So it is basically to train or coach where was the point where you broken and you would have done better, right? So these are some of the interesting things which are happening in the digital media and entertainment industry. Then comes the retail and the e-commerce, right? So supply chain. When I think of a supply chain, think of this one, right? So today when we have a something gets broken down in my house, right? And I raise a service request, and the person was supposed to come and attend me. Right? When he gives me a call, let's assume that I'm not at home, right? So basically, when I'm not at home, he's basically not doing anything, right? How do we utilize his time, right? So there are route optimization algorithms and also the other algorithms. One is prominent from NVIDIA QOpt, right, which is used to solve these kind of problems, right? Okay, if this person is not at home, can we redirect this personnel to go and do some other job at somebody's house within the same cluster? So these are all clusters, right, within areas. Like, for example, within Malleshwaram itself, if you are in the Malleshwaram Bangalore area, if today this personnel is visiting this area, how many houses he is supposed to cover, and which all houses falls in one cluster, and if this person is not available, what is the best next course of action? Or if there is in between, if there is any new request getting raised, and if that falls into the same cluster, can that person attend that one, right? So this is one more use case which is mostly training in supply chain segment. And e-commerce, I don't have to talk about this because I know that the e-commerce is huge in India, right? With Google Pay, all UPI pays and all those things, right? It has changed the complete dynamics of the market itself. So how about having some voice-based applications for those, right? Or how about having some dynamic pricing for e-commerce website? Or how about bringing the virtual experience, right? For example, think of this, right? So you have a digital mirror with AR, VR enabled, and when a person is trying the outfit, right? So I will define my outfit, and I wear that outfit virtually with AR, VR glasses, and then decide based on whether I'm liking it or not, right? So that is a trend, or that is the segment which the industry is moving towards, right? And then the planograms. This is not quite known in India, but it is very quite known in across the globe, right? Because here the retail stores, the things gets arranged based on the season, based on the interest, based on the festivals, if anything is coming up, right? So, and also those will be the prominently seen aspects, because that is all like, how do you attract more customers? So that's where the retail industry is heading towards, right? So these are some of the use cases within retail and e-commerce, right? Education. So this is the one which I think you all will be very keen on, right? So today we are relying on the intelligence or the Gen AI systems for us to um, for students, like for example, students are utilizing these systems, right? So how now faculties will utilize these systems to identify whether this is a human generated response or the machine generated response. So that's becoming a prominent use case, and we are seeing this change in education system, right? And the other aspect of this is like the digital humans, right? Because it is not possible for if you want to have a same lecture to deliver the same class to the broader audience, how do you do it, right? You can have a digital avatar which is personalized, which is customized, which can help to deliver the content which a lecturer wanted to deliver it to the broader audience, right, at the same time. So that's where that aspect is coming into the play. And also, if you bring in the digital humans, right, or the digital uh, digital digital avatars or digital human beings, also those digital humans can talk to them, right? So we have the hologram, the devices or the holograms getting built. When I ask a question, it would respond to me as a human being. So we have a couple of examples on that, and that is getting utilized in education industry to a bigger extent, right? For example, how do you create a personalized, uh, personalized plan, right? The personalized upskill plan for anybody who was, their skill set, their history, and what's coming up next. What are the courses they have to choose, and what is the prerequisites required, and what they have to be doing in which week. So all this customized plan are getting built, right? So this is possible with Gen AI, right? And then assessment, I already mentioned that, if AI, if students are using AI, then the proctors and evaluators are also going to use the AI that make use of the same system to build these things, right? This is in education, right? Because I think with all these use cases, with all this given, having said all of these aspects, I would like to touch just a couple of minutes on ethical AI, right? Because this is becoming, a big headache for many of the enterprises, because we don't we don't know what data is being utilized for what purpose, and what are and a lot of enterprises are doing a lot of ideation projects on Gen AI, but they're not putting it in the production because they're scared of their IP getting damaged, because IP is something very specific to the company, and most of the industries rely on those IP today, right? So what if it get compromised, right? So that's where your data sovereignty comes into the play, right? So this data sovereignty and AI sovereignty is very prominent in European countries, because they don't want their data to be like, it is basically the geographical boundary for the data, right? So today we are hosting the data everywhere, right? And they don't want this data to be utilized outside. They don't want their data uh, to be used beyond their geography, or the data being transferred from their geography to another geography, right? It is a compromise on many of the things, because in European countries, even knowing the date of birth in specific countries, date of birth of a person is not possible for you. Even that is, except HRs in those companies, nobody else will know their date of birth. Even if you have your friend next to you, you will not know what is the date of birth of that person, right? So that's how the data is being treated in European countries. So that's the data sovereignty and AI sovereignty part, right? And then the trustworthy and the AI governance aspects. AI governance is holistic approach where you want to govern the complete end-to-end process and have the control on each of these layers, right? Control and whatever the outcomes, whatever is coming. So I know what I'm trying to do with that, right? So that's the AI governance part. Then comes your trustworthy piece. Trustworthy has a lot of pillars. For example, in some of the countries, you cannot release the model to the production without meeting these trustworthy principles, like reproducible. The AI, the whatever I have done so far, I should be able to reproduce. So I need to record every step of it. Right? If you think of a MLOps example here, the model, the data engineer takes the data, curates the data, and provide the data to the data scientist to build the model. The data scientist builds the model and push it to the model registry, from where the model will be picked up and deployed for or used for the inference by the MLOps engineer, correct? So how will you reproduce, in which stage, what result it was, right? When it comes to the audit, we need to know at every stage what it was done, how it was done, right? So that is one aspect to it. It need to be reproducible. It need to be explainable, right? It is a black box today, right? Especially the deep learning models are black box today. I'm giving the data, it is giving me the outcome. Does your elders or does your elders trust on AI? Not completely, because it's a black box. We don't know how that outcome is coming, right? So that's where the explainability piece, how that outcome is being made, is where the explainability piece comes into the play, right? So and also the accountability. Who is accountable if something goes wrong, right? Is it the data scientist? In what stage? Is it the data engineer? In what stage? Is it the MLOps engineer? In what stage, right? Who is responsible? Who is accountable? Who is, informed? So you need to have those capabilities or that understanding if you want to have this, right? So these are some of the pillars which comes or falls into the trustworthy AI piece. So, and also a lot of copyright issues are getting compromised, and that's where the organizations are forming the ethical AI segments in, especially for AI in the organization, where there are going to be a groups or people where they want to build this forum to kind of evaluate these AI projects and come to a conclusion whether this is really really a legitimate one or non-legitimate one, right? So that's where this whole gamut is changing in terms of responsible or the ethical AI, right? I know I'm running short of time. I'll just another 5 minutes. I'll close on this. Okay. So here the major focus for me was for you guys to see the opportunities, right? This is an opportunity space for you. If you think of architecture, the GenAI, the first graph, right? GenAI platform and integration approach. Focus on the last 3 points, right? Where the lack is. Platforms are getting selected, integrations are just starting, right? So that is 19%. And then if you say platforms are identified, no integration, no integrated architecture, 23%, no platform selected, integration approach defined, right? So 43%. So you see these areas, and these are the areas where you have to skill and be aware and keep your eyes, ears, everything open to understand and learn what this really means, right? Literally, organizations are struggling on the integration aspects because we have legacy application, you have modern applications. Modern applications are your AI, Gen AI, right? And you also already have legacy application. Can I just bring in the AI? Is just about the intelligence, right? I have AI, but the intelligence has to go embed somewhere in some application, right? So how do I do it? That's where this architecture segment and this integration segment is coming into play, right? Then the Gen AI journey, right? So if you focus on that 34%, right? POCs are completed, right? But production, see the production, how much of are getting into the production? Lot of challenges, lot of bigger space to play, right? I already mentioned many of the organizations are doing a lot of ideation work, all cool and fancy project, but they are not getting into the production because there is a lot of gap in between. There is a data gap, there is an integration gap, there is a skill gap, there is a the inference gaps, a lot of that, right? And then comes your data platform readiness for GenAI adoption. I already mentioned if data is right, everything is right. If data is wrong, everything is wrong, right? So if you focus on that 39%, right? Partially ready requires enhancement, right? So data curation, data labeling, all we spoke in that slide, how the data for AI and GenAI is the differences, right? All those data pipelining, data processing, all those are still the important segment which is really required, and that's where you have to think of upskilling also from the data perspective, right? That one part. Then the talent part. The talent part is where you see that we lack talent today, right? I already mentioned when the IT world started, we started with a different dimension, and we are a different dimension today altogether, right? So the upskill is happening. So you guys have lot of opportunities where you can see, build the things, and there is a lot of investment happening in many of the organization to upskill, and also for you to be industry ready. I think you have to focus on the holistic approach. Just don't focus on one model or one tool. That is not going to help, right? So that's the whole perspective, or I wanted to bring in and showcase that these are the lot of gaps in all these segments, right? And then last but not the least, what are the different roles, right? Some of the roles are missing here, but if you see the prominent roles which are must have AI roles, right? The ML engineer, prompt engineer, AI ethicist, that is for ethical AI, right? The head of the AI, data and AI translator, data scientist, the MLOps engineer is missing, the data engineer is missing, right? So sorry, the data engineer is here, right? So these are the roles which industry is looking forward for, right? And then the emerging roles, you can see the model validator, the knowledge engineer, because especially with the domains, right? The SMEs are missing today for the knowledge engineer. You can think it for, especially for the Gen AI applications, the knowledge engineers are the one, right? And then the decision engineer, who is going to make the decision at the end of all of this era, right? So end of all of this Gen AI application, what is right, what is wrong is where we'll have to evaluate, right? And you can see the other roles like, the product managers, UX designers, because UX designers are also important, because how do you make it more customized? How do you make it more personalized, right? If you go talk to somebody, even if me, right, I would love to have a feel of my personalized approach and the customized approach. The more the personalization you bring into me, the more I'll fall for it, right? So that's the UX designer aspect to it, right? Not just having, because there is a study behind this, right? The UI design itself. sensor should be of this length, this box should be of this height, and this should be placed here, this is the color, and all that of right. So that is really required still, but may not be in the similar format. It will be in the enhanced format. Like for example, how can you make the UX design more prominent for digital twin kind of applications, right? Where it is all hologram based, metaverse based application, which are built with point clouds, which are built with, bringing in these point clouds together within the library. And how do you create that framework, or how do you create it? It is all tiles, right? You bring in the tiles and make that, give that complete approach to it, right? And then architects and governance, risk and governance specialists, yes, a lot of things are getting compromised. So, and a lot of companies are hesitant to adopt GenAI because of this. There is a broader opportunity there as well, right? So there is a lot of tremendous opportunity, right? If I have to summarize this whole picture, where we started with how the market is, right? What are the trending technologies, especially in Gen AI, and how Gen AI and AI are changing the things, and where are the opportunities for you guys? Where are the gaps for you guys? Those gaps, identify at the right time and hit the nail hard, right? Don't just rely on what is already there. Think of it beyond what is not there, right? Think of it from the production ready system. Just don't think of the system as an independent one tool or independent one application. That is not the chain. It is all ecosystem. So you have to think it from the holistic approach. With this, I would like to conclude, and thank you for hearing me for a hour long. Let me know if there are any questions, if I have to answer, or I can take it offline, or whatever is best possible for you guys. Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am, for such an insightful session. We are now open for questions. We have a question in chat box on which there was quite a discussion between our participants. To summarize, the question had 3 points. That is, sorry, ma'am.
Please go ahead.
Yeah. The question is, will DeepSeek's open source nature accelerate AGI development? Could its minimal hardware requirements significantly impact AGI evolution? As engineering students, how can we leverage DeepSeek or similar tools to build and deploy custom generative models locally with minimal hardware?
Very, very interesting question, right? And there is a lot of research going behind this, okay? This is where I said that, I'm more for small language models compared to the larger language models, right? And DeepSeek is exactly hitting that, right? And DeepSeek is all about, the challenging part, or the challenge the organizations of the globe is, how can we minimally use the hardware, and what is the minimalistic hardware we require to run these models, right? There are multiple ways to accelerate this one. And of course, now coming, how do I utilize this for AGI, right? You can utilize this for the AGI, of course, yes, right? But again, remember this, when you want to do it for the AGI requires lot amount of data, right? So you were somewhere, you will end up requiring the accelerators and the specialized hardware. You cannot completely rely on minimal hardware to do the AGI, right? Because AGI is generalized intelligence. Generalized intelligence is like your human brain. Imagine human brain, right? Human brain, can I take small amount of human part of human brain and do something? Not possible, right? So you need to have holistic and more and more accelerators to perform this. Yeah. Any other questions?
Yes, ma'am. I hope this answered your question, Sharvana. Yeah, we have another question from Nagashri. That is the question about data security and trust in AI systems. Could you elaborate on how patient data is secured when used by AI, especially given the sensitivity of healthcare information? Additionally, how can we trust the accuracy of AI-driven decisions, considering that AI can sometimes produce errors or biased outcomes?
Okay. So this is where I said that, we have the gap, right? So how the patient data is secured. That's where you think of this, right? We sit in the especially I sit in the organization where it is a services-based organization from HPE, right? We actually develop the use cases for the customers, right? And they don't give us the system as is. They kind of hide the important aspects of some of the data. We kind of dedupe the data, and sometimes we kind of mask that data set, or maybe synthetically generate some of the fields. For example, the patient's date of birth, the patient's age, gender. These are some of the data segments which are hidden from us, and they don't give the data as is to us when developing the algorithms. They will have the actual data. We will have a synthetically generated these data sets or these data columns given to us, and then we utilize that data and build the model. And the testing and training is done by only authorized, or basically the final testing, right? The inference is basically done, or the model validation is done by their engineers within the specialized rooms where they don't let anybody get inside to do all these things, right? So that's how the data is being secured with synthetic data, by data masking and hiding the data, which is the which or how that can be secured in all ways, how they can protect that IP from them. Yeah. And then the next part of the question, how can we trust the accuracy? This is the same challenge everywhere, right? How can we trust the accuracy? So, for example, one aspect to today in agentic AI, what agentic AI is bringing in onto the table is whatever the machine is predicting, is that right or wrong? The agents are being used for validation purpose, right? And it is all experimentation stage. That's why most of the models are not making it to the production, because we don't know, right? So still lot of scope and lot of gaps are there in the prediction. So the low hanging fruits is where organizations are ready to put their model and get the outcome, or ready to ready to productionize the models. But if it's a bigger one, right? For example, uh, when doctors, especially when doctors are trying to understand the history of a patient, right, that are kind of automated, and the AI model is helping to some extent. That is okay, because still it is not something that would lead to a situation where it becomes the very difficult one to handle, right? But if you think of a different situation where it is like the where it would impact, or where it would go and affect the human life itself, I think in those cases is where the organizations are not fully relying on AI models today. That is the opportunity area.
Thank you, ma'am. We have another question from Dr. Prasanna, ma'am. Which open source accelerators for the students can be recommended to carry their projects or research work?
Open source accelerators are very tough because when I talk about the accelerator, I'm talking about the GPU's backend. Okay, so that's my thought process. So I don't think so we have that flexibility today to get the GPUs freely anywhere. Yeah. Hope I had a good answer to say that this is where you can go and experiment. That is not possible today. It's tough one to crack. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am. We have another question. Let's first address the questions in the chat, then we will give opportunity for the participants to unmute themselves.
Sure.
This is the last question. Should students rely on AI-assisted learning and innovation, leveraging AI tools to enhance their projects, or should they focus on building everything from scratch to develop deeper problem-solving skills? Also, if someone uploads their ideas or projects to AI models, is there a risk that AI stores and uses this data for future responses?
Assisted learning and innovation, leveraging AI tools and enhance their project, or should they focus on building it? Okay, everything building from the scratch is not a recommended approach, because today so many advancements are happening. Building from scratch is like reinventing the wheel, right? It's intelligent to utilize the ways which are available, right? And for example, how can we rely on how can we upload the data, and how can we say that it will be secured? the best answer for this I can think of is like you hosting, for example, what organizations are doing, or especially some of the companies are doing here, are hosting the certain models in their own premises, right? That way you are not letting your data to go out. Your data and your AI model is within your premises. So you know you will have a control, and you will have all the aspects to handle it, right? So these are the ways how you can handle these situations.
Thank you, ma'am. Now, if participants have any questions, they can raise their hand and ask their questions.
Hello, ma'am. Am I audible?
Yeah, I can hear you. Please go ahead.
Yeah. Yes. SLMs, as you said, like SLMs are more in use. Like we can make use of SLMs than LLMs, right? So SLMs are more vulnerable to the attacks due to their small sizes or like lower redundancy in the knowledge representation. Like for an example, if an attacker modifies the cybersecurity report data by changing key terms with linguistic similar, the rare words, an LLM may recognize the intent, what based on the broader linguistic understanding, but SLMs with limited redundancy might misqualifies the text or like can't able to detect that attack. Keeping this in mind, thing is like why one organization should compromise with the output quality by using SLMs which are very much vulnerable to these kind of adversarial attacks.
Very thoughtful and very good question. Okay. So when I said to focus on SLMs, my thought process was not to mention that organizations are using SLMs. Let me correct that. Okay. So my thought
Okay.
process, like when you don't have capabilities to host or to rely on, because you cannot rely on completely on LLMs, right? Because if you take the OpenAI today, can you host the Open LLM? OpenAI's LLM? Not possible, right? In that case, how can we have the model within our premises, which is under my control, right? So once the model is hosted in your thing, right? So there is at least some amount of control on the data being fed to that model, correct? And I do agree that this is where another research segment, which at least I am aware, or I'm also involved in that research segment, is DeepSeek, right? Today, do we know how DeepSeek is going to behave, or how it is going to change the things 2 years from today? Can anybody prove how it is built, right? Uh, for that matter, the same thing happens with the SLMs or the small language models as well, right? So it is beyond the thing like to understand many of these gametes, but for given situation today, if you have some amount of thing and some amount of capabilities where we want to invest, that's where I think the SLMs are playing the wider aspect. Does that helps you, Nirup, or you think?
Yeah. Yes, ma'am. Yes. I got it. Thank you.
Right, that's the research topic too, right? If you want to put your head and thoughts together, I'm all happy. That's the research topic too today. you know Tell me
Yeah,
how
ma'am. Sure.
what
I'm happy.
is there in that model, right? I don't know. So that's one topic also, which many of the organizations are putting, trying to understand how it is going, or what it is there in the model. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am. We'll be closing now. Thank you, everyone, for asking those great questions, and thank you, ma'am, for promptly answering them. Now we are nearing the end of the session. Now I would like to call Anusha to deliver the vote of thanks.
Artificial intelligence is the new electricity and driving. Just as electricity transformed industries, AI is reshaping the world, and today's session has been a testament to its potential. With this thought, we express our sincere gratitude to everyone who contributed to making this event meaningful and impactful. First and foremost, we sincerely thank Ms. Bhuneshwari for sharing her invaluable insights on AI and generative AI. Your expertise and perspectives have greatly enriched our understanding and have inspired us to explore the vast possibilities in this field. Thank you, ma'am. A heartfelt gratitude to the IEEE WIE Bangalore section and Dr. Usha Rani, IEEE WIE Bangalore section chairperson, for the continuous support. To our core team for their efforts in making this event a success, and to all our attendees for their enthusiastic participation. Your engagement and curiosity make events like these even more meaningful. We encourage you all to stay tuned to our social media platforms where we will be sharing details about our next RP event, which will be revealed soon. Once again, thank you everyone for being a part of this event. We look forward to seeing you at our upcoming sessions. Thank you one and all.